Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this remote meeting of the Housing and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee, held on the 10th of February at 5 p.m. and it's 2022. Before we start, just can I remind everyone to keep your microphones on mute, please, and only unmute when you are contributing to the meeting. That is, other than the Vice Chair and myself, who will have our cameras and microphones on at all times. If you wish to contribute, please use the hands up function to indicate you'd like to speak. And this evening we will be using Microsoft Forms for voting on agenda items 3, 4 and 5. If members have connection issues or who are joining us by telephone, can they just state their vote? And while I'm talking about agenda items, the proposal tonight is that we will put agenda item 3 first, followed by 5 and then 4, because 3 and 5 are very similar issues. So tonight, as well as members and officers, we are joined by 3 guest speakers. So we've got Chris Wilkins from Pentown Architects, we've got Dan Jones from Wilmot Dixon, and we've got Craig Jones from Holder Mathias Architects. So a warm welcome to all of you. I know we'll be hearing from you later in the meeting. Forgive me, my screen is now frozen. Okay, I'm back on track. I'll start by reading the Council's privacy statement. This meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images and/or audio of those individuals speaking will be publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website at www.caerphilly.gov.uk. So moving on to the agenda, and agenda item 1 is to receive apologies for absence. Mark, are there any apologies for absence other than those already passed on to committee services?
No, Chair. We've just got apologies from Councillor Bevan, Councillor Goff, Councillor Gaynor Oliver and Councillor Zaplatinsky.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. I think it would be helpful for anyone viewing this later if we did a roll call. Would you mind doing that, please, Mark?
Yes, certainly, Chair. Councillor Adams.
Present.
Councillor Cushing.
Present.
Councillor Ellsbury.
I'm here. I hope you can hear me. I've had a few issues with microphones lately.
Yes, we can hear you, Councillor Ellsbury. Thank you. Councillor Harding.
Present.
Councillor Higgs. Councillor Kirby. Councillor Leonard.
Present. just.
Councillor Leonard. Councillor Owen.
Present.
Councillor Price. Councillor Ridgewell.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Sargent. Councillor Williams.
Present.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, fine. It's now incumbent on me to read the declaration of interest. So councillors and officers are reminded of their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudicial interest in respect of any item of business on this agenda in accordance with Local Government Act 2000, the Council's Constitution, and the conduct of councillors, for both councillors and officers. Are there any declarations of interest? I don't see any hands up. Mike, do you see any hands up?
I don't. I've just scrolled down. None, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thanks. So moving on to agenda item 3, which is the proposed development of the former Oakdale Comprehensive School for residential development. I'll hand over to Councillor Shane Cook, who's going to be introducing the report, and the author Jane Roberts-Waite as well, and I think we'll have some other speakers too. So over to you, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chair. The report from members this evening outlines the proposed development opportunity at the former Oakdale Comprehensive School site and seeks approval in a principle to develop the site for Caerphilly Homes' first flagship mixed tenure residential development. Subject to confirmation from the district valuer, which is sought to appropriate the site from the general fund into the HRA by the end of the financial year 2021-2022. in order that social housing grant can be withdrawn down from Welsh Government to part fund the purchase. The report is seeking the views of the Housing and Regen Scrutiny Committee prior to its presentation and final in-principle approval from Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Jane, do you want to speak to the report?
I think Nick is going to speak, Chair, if that's okay.
Fine,
please.
okay, sorry, Nick. Yeah, over to you.
You're on mute, Nick.
Nick did say he was having connection problems. Any indication, Mark, that
Right, I should be with you now. Can you
Yes,
hear
we
me?
can hear you, Nick.
Sorry, my Teams is being very slow, so apologies. All I was going to say is I don't want to add too much more than Councillor Cook has introduced, because we do have our professional colleagues here to present in a little bit more detail the scheme. I just want to highlight both for this scheme and for the following scheme, this is largely in principle approval for appropriation of the land from the general fund into the HRA, and I just want to highlight the timings of this, and that's the critical point, and why we're bringing it now is because of the drawdown of social housing grants to part fund that acquisition and appropriation being the end of this financial year. We don't have the district valuer information yet, but we do need scrutiny approval and cabinet approval in order to then meet the deadlines of drawing down the SHG. So that's the main primary objective of bringing it through the governance process today. We also have the opportunity of obviously explaining a little bit more about the scheme and the process thereafter. This is a very exciting scheme. It'll be one of the flagship schemes, Oakdale, for Caerphilly Homes. It's the first site that I actually been on site to see since I've been at the council. I'm very excited about this, the opportunity here in order to deliver much needed affordable housing, much needed private housing, and to deliver a high performing scheme in terms of sustainability, energy consumption, meeting our kind of net zero aspirations for the council. So very important on a number of fronts. The main reason is the appropriation of the land, but I'll hand over to our other colleagues that are here now to take you through some of the highlights of the scheme.
Thanks very much, Nick. So who have we got speaking now? Is it going to be Nick or somebody like that?
It'll be Dan and Craig from Dan from Wilmot Dixon and Craig from our architects, Holden Matthias.
Oh, great. Okay. So Dan, over to you.
Thanks, Chair, and good evening, everybody. So first, I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name's Daniel Jones, the pre-construction manager with Wilmot Dixon Construction. Just like to start off by saying, thanks for giving us the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I'd like to echo what Nick said really about, this is a really exciting scheme, one in which we're sort of thrilled to be working closely with yourselves. So if I could just share my screen, if that's okay, we'll go into a little bit more detail. Is that okay for everyone? You see the slides?
Yeah. Yep.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. So firstly, then, I'm just going to give a bit of a brief background on the project. As you're probably already aware, it's the former Oakdale Comprehensive School site located in Penmine. The main aims are obviously to assist the borough with its targets by delivering the much needed affordable and social rented homes to the area, bring sustainable, high quality and energy efficient homes to the site, and utilise open market sales to create a cross-subsidiary model to reduce overall capture expenditure. And importantly, create a community with really sensitive placemaking throughout the site. This is just a sort of illustration, if you like. It's a little bit difficult to judge this site if you look at it from a bird's eye view. So we've been fortunate to get a drone up in the air, and we've got some sort of illustrations here to try and bring this to life. Craig, the architect, will talk a bit more about the levels of the site in a second, but as you'll see from this illustration, there are sort of quite a step change in levels as you progress through the site. So that is something we really need to be sensitive of when we develop the design going forward. Here's a few more screenshotted views from different angles, just to try and sort of identify the sort of site as it is. you'll see on the top there it's relatively level, and there's a transition really from across the middle down to the plateau, which is again relatively level towards the bottom, but we'll come on to that in a bit more detail in a second. I'll now hand you over to Craig just to talk a bit more about the site. Thanks, Craig.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dan. Good evening, everybody. Evening, Chair. Thank you to you and to everybody again for the opportunity to talk to you tonight, and hopefully provide a little bit of an outline of the kind of early indications of the principle of the proposal that we have working with Jane, Chris, Mark, and the teams in the council. So very much a kind of collaborative venture. This definitely is not a matter of us instilling our ideas or imposing our ideas on the site or on anybody. It's a totally collaborative thing. We're really excited, actually, and proud to be part of this. And this is building on some of the kind of learnings of the initial pilot sites, which you're probably familiar with, which are being constructed as we speak at the Trekennydd and Tretomys sites. So kind of part of that kind of evolution of the programme, but the word flagship was mentioned earlier on. Flagship means different things to different people, but in terms of what we consider to be a flagship, it would be an exemplar in terms of placemaking, and that's placemaking for people. So this is all about people and community and integration. So it's placemaking for people in a holistic way to create a community, and a low carbon community, which we can all be proud of. So we're here to do our utmost and our very best for you as a kind of whole design and construction team, working under Jane, Chris, and Mark's guidance. Dan's outlined the kind of general nature of the site and outlined some of the topography. One of the key things we're looking to do here all this evening is just to convey the levels or everything. When you look at a photograph or looking at Google Maps, of course, it's everything looks nice and flat, doesn't it? But when you visit the site itself, you get a lot of features. So we'll be working with the site, and one of the major challenges is the topography. And Dan mentioned about the lower plateau and upper plateau and Long Oakdale Terrace and Penmine Estate just now. But one of the challenges we have, and one we've accepted readily and looking to make the most of, is how do we make this one site? We talked about integration and community just now. So one of the kind of key drivers for the kind of site proposal will be to ensure that we have one site, so we don't end up with some houses and some development on the upper plateau, and then there's a lower plateau. So it's there's no them and us, even though it's a mixed tenure site, and they all be mixed around the site, which is really important from a community and people and kind of social development perspective. So what one site, and that's the challenge. How do we create a one site situation which also links into all the other opportunities for pedestrian and cycle network through existing rights of way, existing connections, and how do we strengthen those around the site, in the site, and through the site, so that not just the residents of this site can use it, but actually wider community, particularly things like play areas and some of the kind of natural woodland walks. So very much looking to stitch this into part of the Oakdale grain and community, rather than you might see the little image on the left hand side there showing a red line around the site, but that red line is a planning boundary red line. But in real terms, we want this to be integrated into the fabric and knit well into the street scene and the community we have in the existing area. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks very much indeed.
Well, dwelling on this, we talked about the topography, so this is just give an impression. On the left-hand side, you've got a 3D kind of model looking from the kind of northwest down towards the kind of southeast, and you can see the top of Oakdale Terrace at the back of that model, running left to right along the top. And on the right-hand side, you can see a topographic plan of the existing site. And Oakdale Terrace is taken along Spine Road, of course, on the right-hand side. At the bottom and right of the screen, where it there's a junction with Penmine Estate, and that goes down the hill to the old school car park. On the upper plateau and the bottom right of the main site, we have the Mugger, and I know there are consideration being given to how that's relocated and what is best in community interests and how the development of this site knits in with that. So I know there's consideration. So while there won't be a mugger in the proposal on this site. I wouldn't want anybody on the call here to think that we've, as a development team, have forgotten about that conveniently, because that's certainly not the case. And Jane might be able to elaborate a little bit more on that if need be. Thanks, Dan. I think we've dwelt enough on the levels for now. The concept is very simple. It's to create one site, access off Oakdale Terrace, so the one kind of main access. So we don't provide 2 or 3 different vehicular accesses, certainly, and we certainly don't have any rat running. That might not sound the most kind of positive thing to say, but it is a positive that we actually control vehicle movement within the site, and we restrict it, and we keep that to a reasonable, practical and safe minimum. But this is about placemaking for people, and there are a couple of areas, and we don't have time to dwell on everything this evening, but just a couple of highlights. Oakdale Terrace and Penmine Estate, there's a nice tight urban grain, with the post office and the pub and the existing housing down the hill. So we're looking to keep a tight urban grain as tight as we can to Oakdale Terrace. And on the northern side, so that'll be the kind of top right of the coloured concept area, where it goes further up Oakdale Terrace, it becomes more kind of semi-urban in its form, and maybe the development can reflect that at that point. The way the levels work is that the internal street is actually key to providing definition of enclosure and street scene. So how do we actually bring dwellings quite close to the street scene? How do we deal with cars, which is the inevitable question, of course, in terms of policy compliant and maybe desirability for how that fits in with active travel and some of the kind of good measures that you're implementing in the borough, and ensuring that we do have a development which kind of acts as one site all the way down. In the top of the picture, where you can see obviously the blue, we call it a lagoon stroke SUDS area, which is sustainable urban drainage. Many of you will probably know all about that. But the opportunity for a play area and a really green area, you can see there's a lot of green in this plan. So there's a lot of existing woodland kept. You can see some of the brown lines coloured in through there are existing links to be established and embellished and reinforced. Maybe links to the Penmine Estate to the bottom of the picture, to the existing bridge and road network on the left-hand side, and to Oakdale Terrace, of course, on the right-hand side. So it's very much a place for people. Very kind of transient in terms of movement and permeability, which is also good with the way the frontages and the street scene works out. Very good for overlooking, security, and all those things which maybe don't always appear obvious when you're looking at a nice pretty picture, but actually are fundamental to the way that we think about how places should work. Thanks, Dan. And just an idea on Oakdale Terrace, showing the sense of enclosure. If you're looking there, you're looking with Oakdale Terrace running in the foreground of that diagram, running from bottom left to top right. And on the left-hand side, where we have the words pedestrian and cycle link, provides permeability to the site. That's the street scene in Penmine Estate, to give you an idea of context. So it's meant to show a degree of enclosure, nice and tight down the bottom of the site near Oakdale Terrace, opposite the pub, the post office, and with the existing grain, and maybe kind of slackening back away from the road a little bit as you go up Oakdale Terrace. Thanks, Dan. So this is the plan. The reason we've shown this plan, as well as the nice, pretty coloured hand-drawn one 2 slides before, was to just to confirm to everybody this is a proper parameter plan when the official plans that has been submitted as part of the outline planning application. So it's a slight evolution from the concept plan in a way that the internal street has frontage wherever we can, wrapping around the corner to create that one place situation. Existing woodland, you can see as a large swathes of existing woodland and existing trees retained. Some of the levels then are worked out into the embankments with the existing woodland as well. So we're working with the site and its features and topography, which, of course, the public purse is obviously a very kind of mindful thing that we have. This isn't our site. This is your site for you. We're mindful of keeping costs to a minimum while creating a really, really good place for people. So we're doing the best we can, and part of that, from an efficiency point of view, is working with the site and with the engineering backup we have from Cambria, who aren't here this evening, looking at how the levels work, how drainage works, how sustainable drainage and attenuation and storage works, so we don't put pressure on existing systems. So all those kind of engineering things are kind of layered in the background to this plan, and the detail of that will be worked up in the next stage in the next few months, all being well. Thanks, Dan. We talked about topography, and we showed some of the sections earlier on, but this is just to show some section at the top through the site, to show how the site steps down. So the diagram at the top, if you think the right-hand side is at Oakdale Terrace, and you're cutting down the site then towards the the main road off the site on the very left-hand side of the slide. And just a couple of 3D views to give an idea of how this site steps down. There's quite a lot of level differences. So roofscape will be important. The way the buildings turn corners will be important. Make sure we'll have windows and openings that overlooking the main street scene and certainly the play area at all times. Just to give an impression of what the degree of cut that we're talking about. Thanks, Dan. And then just to finish off, you'll be pleased to hear, just two or three slides to give with a few perspective hand-drawn images, just to give a flavour of how this might evolve. And this isn't, please don't look at this and think, oh, actually, I'm not sure about that material colour there on the left-hand side. This is about giving an impression of scale and how the street scene works. And you can see on the right-hand side of that image, you've got the existing buildings, and that's quite a tight street scene where the buildings are quite tight to the road. And that's what we like to do going up Oakdale Terrace. You've got the junction of Penmine Estate on your left-hand side in the foreground. And what we like to try and do is create an appropriate scale and enclosure and the junction between Penmine Estate and Oakdale Terrace. Thanks, Dan. A view into the main approach as you turn off Oakdale Terrace into the site. So almost like a small kind of boulevard, created a kind of decent scale, very kind of people focused, and some key buildings and houses down the end as a focus to the end of the vista. And from there you can turn left or right into the internal street to be able to take you to the rest of the site. Thanks, Dan. The view from the opposite end of Oakdale Terrace. So as you're looking down south down Oakdale Terrace, so you can see the kind of woodland area and the crossing on the left-hand side and the site on the right. And this is where they made the development steps away from the road a little bit. We have kind of some levels issues to sort out there, particularly challenging with the highway. But that one way you address that is maybe moving the development back slightly, and of course the existing properties further up the road behind you, as if you could turn 180 degrees from here, actually do get set back further from the road and quite well landscaped front gardens and the like. So try and change the character of the site from the bottom near Penmine Estate to the top, and maybe have a transition after the entrance. Thanks, Dan. And a nice one to look at. This is from the play area and maybe the lagoon and the drainage features in the kind of the bottom left-hand part of the picture there. And you can see the main internal street coming down from the upper layer through the middle and wrapping around the corner. But one of the key things here is about the sense of enclosure, and that we've got dwellings looking out onto these streets, so you've got safe situations. We don't have areas where the play area is not overlooked by anybody. We don't have parking courtyards where there aren't any dwellings looking out over them. So again, a safe environment is something that we need to be creating, but not in a deliberately active way. We need to do that passively and build that safety and security into the design. So part of good design about placemaking, that is a fundamental part of it. Thanks, Dan.
Great, thanks, Craig. That's a very comprehensive sort of summary of all the work that the team's been involved with thus far, really. I'm just going to sort of conclude with 2 slides, just covering the achievements so far and the next step. So the achievements sort of in 2021 was to establish the initial scope and brief for the development. And as we've discussed, set about completing the vast number of site surveys, in terms of ecology and everything else, to fully ensure that we've got a handle on the abnormals and the risks associated with the site, and to mitigate those as we go forward. And also the design progression there that Craig sort of very nicely talked us through. You can see there's a lot of thought and engineering that are behind the sort of plans that we're proposing. Obviously, there is a lot more work to do through the detailed design development, which we do hopefully look forward to over the next couple of months. But what we've been keen to ensure is that what we're presenting today is, achievable. We've not come to something that hasn't been thought out and is going to have to drastically change over the next couple of months. So that was important. Obviously, the dialogue with planning. So we've had the pre-app and the pack undertaken earlier towards the end of last year, and the milestone of submitting the outline planning in December. Which we are looking for determination come March this year. Initial SAB discussions as well have been had and meetings held, so we look forward to progressing the detailed design now and incorporating the various SAB and SUDS features on the layout. And the Welsh Government technical scrutiny meetings, the initial meeting was held in December, and again we look forward to keeping those going. Just in terms of the next steps, in terms of finalising the mix for the homes, including the density of the apartments, and then that will allow us to firm up the final site layout and progress the detailed works in things like site levels, house layouts and elevations, the roads, the footpaths, the landscaping, all the exciting stuff really that we're really looking forward to getting on with. We've touched on the mugger, finalised the agreement for that relocation. That's also important. We're looking to target the outline planning approval, again, with all matters reserved. So things like layout, etc., would still be flexible. And that is sort of March coming up. Progress discussions regarding the land value with the around the abnormals and the site specifics. Complete the ecology works. Obviously, some of those works have had to be sort of put on hold through the winter periods, but now come March time, we'll be able to reboot some of those. So we look forward to that. Continue to develop the commercial model further with Caerphilly as the sort of detailed design becomes available and we're able to go out to the market and get accurate costings. And then finally target the reserves plan application submission in the summer with the excitement of works starting on site come autumn 22. So that's the next upcoming steps, and that's the end of my sort of presentation with Craig. So I'm going to stop talking and hand back to you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks so much indeed. Yeah, it really is an exciting development. I think we all share that. Before I open it up for questions, I've got one question myself. I'm familiar with the site, an ex-Oakdale resident. My son went to the school there, so I know it quite well. It is a steep slope. My recollection of it is, and in a way, I think some of the graphics didn't really show that. So the question I've got is, what's the slope going to be on the road going up? Is it going to 1 in 8, 1 in 10, or steeper than that? Do you know?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Dan, if that's okay. Thanks for the question. Our engineering colleagues who are on the call would say, I think that the internal street has a maximum gradient of 1 in 10. So spot on the nail really. So that's what we're aiming, and that's a safe design, and there's no way we would compromise that. So that fundamentally has to work is one of the key aspects, and you've come straight to the point very, very quickly and well there. Thank you. But yeah, 1 in 10 is the suitable gradient, and you saw in the concept plan some of the radii and some of the bends in the scheme. So we've been through those even at a very, very early stage that we're at. I think there's a danger sometimes, and I'm prone to do it myself. When you look at CAD drawings or Revit drawings these days, and something is drawn in that way, it looks quite precise, of course, doesn't it? And you might think, well, it's a really, really, really well worked resolved scheme, but there's still a lot of work to do on it. But when the fundamentals is to make sure that internal street works properly, safely, good visibility, good sight lines, whether people are walking along it, cycling on it, vehicles driving, people who know the site pretty well, visiting delivery drivers who don't know the site so well, all those sorts of things are absolutely fundamental for safety.
And plenty of grit bins, should we need them. Okay, thanks very much indeed.
Pleasure.
So if you can take the slides down now, I've still got mine on the screen, so I don't know if you can do that for us.
Sure, there you go. Should be going now.
Oh, excellent. Fine. Okay, right. So members, a very interesting report. Have we got some questions?
Councillor Cushin, Chair. That's first with a hand up.
Thanks very much. Yes.
Always questions from me, as you are fully aware. Yeah, a couple of questions actually on the report that you've submitted. Regarding, because we've got well, it's not a new development, it's quite been up for quite some years now, and we actually call the road going from the top end of the estate down to the bottom end of the estate as the ski slope, because it's that steep. And I'm sure if we had a fair sway of snow on there, you could actually go skiing on it. But I just want clarification. Oakdale Terrace, isn't that the main road that goes through Oakdale? So the actual, is it that side of the road which it will be higher than the back end of the development, or vice versa?
Yeah, I'll take this one, Dan. Yeah. Thanks for that, Councillor. Yes, the Oakdale Terrace side is the high side of the site, so it slopes down the valley towards the the most like the main bypass road and the river.
Right. Yeah.
So if you're looking as a cut through the site, and Oakdale Terrace is going in and out of my, the paper, but in and out of my screen.
Yeah.
And then the site's here, and the site will come and do this, and then come down, and then do that. And then before it kind of drops down to the valley and on the road and the river further down. So yeah, it's definitely sloping that way, if you like, on my ruler.
Yeah.
Oakdale Terrace down that way, not in a straight line like that, but it is that way around.
So you'll probably be
about the appreciate you saying about the gradients, yeah.
Yeah, so you'll probably be developing your own ski slope there, like we've got in a new estate by us. It's just we call it the ski slope because it's actually it swerves round like that, so that's what we call it, the ski slope. Yeah, is there any issues regarding potential flooding?
Engineers are looking at that, and it's kind of fundamental. Dan, in terms of the FCA as part of the outline, you might know a little bit more about it than me. But I think it would be fair to say that the site wouldn't be developed if there's an opportunity for any of these properties to flood. In terms of rainwater management within the site, Councillor, when we come off the junction at Oakdale Terrace that I showed a slide of earlier, rainwater from the highway won't be coming into the site. I think it's fair to say, Dan. Yeah. And within the site itself, there are measures now as part of the kind of SAD process anyway, sustainable urban drainage scheme and compliance with your officers, that we either store or dispose the rainwater through gravity, through percolation, through the soils, or if that isn't possible, at least store it and attenuate it. So when it's released, it is released slowly without putting pressure on the system. And that's part of, if we recall, part of one of the slides I showed about on the plan about I call it lagoon or the drainage area, and that acts as a bit of a storage area from us, as well as a nice landscape feature from an ecology and biodiversity point of view, to help with kind of rainwater storage. So the properties, and that's the lowest part of the site as well. So that's a kind of that's where a good example of working with the site to try and help tease out the answers from the site to help us. Dan, I don't know if you've got a bit more about anything about the flood concept.
No, you covered it nicely. I was just going to add that the initial sort of surveys didn't throw up any concern over flooding on the site. But as Craig has mentioned there, as part of the detailed development now, you mentioned the sort of ski slope as a concern and the flooding, and obviously we will be liaising with the council's drainage officers and highways department to make sure that these designs are suitable and don't have any adverse effects on the site. And like Craig said, the reverse. In fact, we will be looking to make the situation better as part of the detailed design.
Okay, thanks.
Pleasure.
If I may just quickly, is the pool going to be part of the attenuation system? Is that what the plan is? The proposed pool?
Yeah. So at the minute, initial designs are that the rainwater will be sort of captured throughout the site in various swales, if you like, and it will be slowly controlled down to that pool at the bottom, which is the ultimate destination, and then slowly led out then into the surrounding.
Yeah, and
So,
the exact nature of that, and how that actually works, and what it is from a landscaping point of view, it will be resolved in the detail when there are more detailed calculations done about the expected water levels, totals, you know, the 1 in 50, 1 in 10-year climate events, so that we're able to the development's able to manage all that itself without putting pressure on the network and without flooding properties, obviously.
It'll also aid to improve the biodiversity on the site as well. That's sort of part of the aim.
Thanks so much indeed. On my list, I've got Colin, Councillor Aylesbury, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much for your presentation. A couple of things. You obviously on the illustration showed a lot of people cycling. So, and I don't know if you can answer this at this stage. Are you going to be putting in secure cycle bays or cycle racks for people to park their bikes in? That's the first question. Don't know if you can answer that.
I think from a housing perspective, Councillor, the idea is that there's sufficient opportunity for people to have their own kind of bike storage in their own gardens. I think where you've got kind of communal facilities, how a bike stored there. I think in the kind of the pilot sites at Trekennydd and Tretomys, for example, even though they're 6 and 12 units dwellings respectively, there are dedicated cycle stores. So where we have any apartments, I would certainly expect there to be secure, covered cycle storage. In terms of visitor opportunity through the site, you know, for those people who are going to visit in people, I think that option also exists to provide some secure parking, cycle parking spaces dotted around the site. But in terms of cycle parking with each dwelling, those are expected to be through kind of secure rear gardens, or if there are any properties with integral garages, then the opportunity exists there for kind of private cycle parking that's secure for residents only.
Yeah, sorry, I did mean more communal rather than obviously if you've got a bike you can park it in your own shed. The other thing is, obviously by 2030, you're not going to be able to buy a petrol or diesel car in this country. It's all going to be electric. Are there any plans? Because I've noticed in some of the sketches you've got a sort of communal parking, visitor parking. Are there going to be any electric hookup points installed on this? Because obviously that's going to, you know, if we're building houses for the future, that's going to become an issue as we move on. You know, I live in a street with semi-detached houses, and we're off the road. You know, there's about 15, 20 feet to the road. If you're going to get an electric car here, it's going to be very difficult to charge it unless you run the cable across a pavement and halfway down the street. If you can't park outside. So I'm just wondering whether or not you're building this into the plans.
Yeah, that's something that will evolve in the detail, Councillor, now. So don't have the exact answer for you, but on behalf of the team, it is very much kind of a forethought. You know, there's planning policy, of course, and supplementary planning guidance (SPG) on kind of cycle and active travel and car numbers and that sort of thing. And as we'll all kind of move towards a more sustainable world in terms of active travel, that reduced car use over time is one of those things, isn't it? And I think that's a behavioural thing, it's a societal change thing, and it would be absolutely the right thing to do from a kind of looking forward point of view, to consider that infrastructure for electric car charging as part of the scheme. Now, how that actually turns out, again, will be one for you know, Wilmot Dixon's team working with your client team through Jane to look at how that actually works on the site, whether that's individual, whether it can have common charging points, how that's controlled. You know, so the same person doesn't hold the same charger all year round and only go 5 miles a year. So there's all sorts of questions around that, but you're absolutely spot on. It's the right thing to do to consider that. If there have to be cars, then we need to be able to plan for that sort of thing. But I don't have the detailed answer for you at the moment. But in a few weeks or a few months' time, we certainly will. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, thank you
Can I
very
just
much.
add, can I just add, Sarah, on that point, if we are going to meet our kind of a lot of our net zero aspirations in any new development that we're taking forward, this has to be a consideration. And we've seen a number of examples very recently where it's been done in a very comprehensive, efficient, and futuristic, if you will, way. And it's something that we're definitely having to be considered in any new development going forward. But Craig's right, that's the next stage of design, and that will be considered at that point.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Excellent.
Pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Brian, thank you. Before we move on to, I see Jane's got your hand up. Jane, did you want to comment on that, or has Nick covered that?
Yeah, I was going to say something similar to Nick, actually, in as much as there is a commitment, of course, that all Caerphilly home sites will be future ready. Therefore, we are and will be looking at putting the infrastructure in, certainly, to ensure that you know, people who are making the change to electric vehicles are able to do so with ease. And also, you know, as this design develops, the next report we bring forward into this forum will contain the detail that around that, and how many will be provided, where, etc., etc. So yeah, just wanted to reassure Councillor Aylesbury.
Thanks very much indeed.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Adams, Mike, you're next. Do you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And it's something that's been already presented to us in the report so far, really, and it's about energy efficient construction methods, and that's going to be the case for all future house building anyway. That's the obvious route for us to go. Could you elaborate, though, on the benefit for the environment and for those future residents? What is this energy efficiency going to be delivering for the community and for individuals?
Do you want to touch on this, Dan, from a kind of client brief point of view? And then
Yes.
I'll come in on some maybe kind of design aspects if as a bit of support on that. Yeah.
Thanks, both.
Yeah, sure. It's a similar sort of concept to, as Craig already touched on, with the pilot sites, the use of modern methods of construction. So we'll be looking on this scheme to roll out the similar construction technique as on the pilot site. So we'll be utilising the local Caerphilly supply chain, a company called Caladan, who will be manufacturing the panels off-site in their factory under greater control and conditions, which will then be delivered to site and erected in a more efficient manner than the old wet trays that everybody's used to on site with the brick and block. So, you know, that is sort of at the forefront of what we're trying to achieve on this development. You know, we're on a similar journey to yourself in terms of trying to thrust ourselves into the use of these modern methods of construction. And similarly, you know, in terms of the aspirations for this project to be net zero carbon, every stone has to be turned over, you know, so we'll be looking through Craig and his design team, the use of air tightness and making sure that these sort of developments are at the forefront of that in terms of the technology to reduce air leakage, which then reduces the use for your heating. We'll be employing, certainly on the sort of social housing element, the use of sort of technologies such as PV, technologies such as air source heat recovery systems. There'll be no gas on this site, so it will all be operated through sort of air source heat pumps, which draws its sort of power in from the environment, if you like, and therefore what obviously we're all targeting for is a reduction in energy bills, because everybody will have seen what's happening on the news at the minute, and the problems with sort of fuel poverty are sort of increasing. So that is a real important aspect of this sort of project, and you know, the things like triple glazing, you know, the extra insulation in the walls, all of that sort of stuff will be sort of developed on this phase. I'm not sure if I've answered every part of your question there.
No, it's the kind of thing I would have expected, Dan. But when you say no gas on site, I know that we've heard so much about gas boilers.
Yeah.
What about a gas cooker for someone who prefers to use that? No, not optional either. how about colour gas? Bottled gas. Will that also be not on site for
No
anybody
gas,
choosing to
Councillor
look at it?
Adams.
Yep.
Sorry, Chair. I've got to respond there. No gas on site at all, Councillor Adams.
That's okay. I just wanted every little bit of detail out in the open now.
Yeah.
And Craig, are you going to answer then about the benefits then to the environment, as well as we say, the cost of all this modern build to the resident?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Thanks, Dan. Just building on that as a summary, environmental benefits. Of course, Dan talked about tight insulation, air tightness. You don't get leakage. We've all been used to drafts in various properties we've lived in, I'm sure, and maybe still are. So air tightness is controlled, but then you might think and ask the logical question: well, is it safe in there in terms of the amount of air that is actually in there moving around? If it's so airtight, it's squeaky clean like a vacuum. Am I able to open the door with the pressure difference? And am I, is it like living in one of those kind of submarine chambers you see on the films? Well, actually, it's not like that. The ventilation systems provide that level of trickle of fresh air coming through. But with the kind of technology and the systems you use these days, it's coming through at a decent temperature. So it's not like opening your window and having cold air coming in when you want a bit of ventilation when your house is at 20-something degrees. And these type of houses, tests have proven that if it's at 21 degrees and you leave the heating off in a cold winter's day or for 4 or 5 days in a row, that might only go down to about 18 degrees over 5 days without any heating on. So there are huge benefits in the bills, especially for those people who can afford it least, which is a massive social value thing. And I think that's one of the things we're all proud about, or the proudest thing we're about on the pilot sites, is how they're going to people who maybe can afford these bills least will have the lowest bills in the borough. And that's a kind of real kind of changeover in terms of kind of social value and entity. And I think we are all particularly delighted about the social impact on people, and of course people's mindset, their mental health about worrying about bills, and also the pride they can have in actually living in some of the most advanced houses in certainly most advanced houses in Wales.
Exactly.
So, and not just in the borough. So there's a kind of pride about that as well. And this community, as a low carbon community, will add to that along amongst the different tenures as well. So, which is particularly important socially as well as environmentally. So in terms of cost, there's no doubt that these in use, these buildings use less carbon and cost less in terms of pound, shillings and pence to run, which will benefit everybody.
Thank you very much both for that.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you for your time.
I lost connection there for a minute or two, so apologies for that. Nick, your hand's up. I don't know if you wanted to respond to that before we come to Councillor Harding.
I just wanted to add a bit on the impact to the residents. You've covered it very well, Craig. But and you also mentioned the pilot sites, both of you, Dan and Craig. So there will be a lot of learning from those pilot sites. It's one of the reasons that we've done the pilot sites. And I think one thing to note from my perspective is about that it is a different way of living, and there's a journey for our residents that will be living in there, and the kind of research and monitoring that we'll be doing on how the tenants use the properties and how they are then able to experience those savings, etc. is a good piece of learning that we'll take into how we manage these new homes and how we work with the new residents and tenants to manage their homes, because it will be different. But we're using the pilot sites to give us that information and intelligence to ensure that the new future communities manage the properties in the way it's intended.
If I could just add one last thing, if there are no gas on this site, there'll be no digging up of the roads for gas mains.
Not associated with this site.
Yeah.
Not associated with this site. We can't promise that no other utility providers in future at any time
exactly
will come along and do their usual thing and patch the tarmac badly. Yeah, we can't promise that, I'm afraid, for the future.
Okay.
For
Thanks very much.
other areas.
That's the last now, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Craig. Lindsay, Councillor Harding, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Can you see me on there? I don't know if my
your face, but I can hear you. So
you can hear me. Item 5.7 the report in relation to the market sales of properties on site. I note the market sale homes will be constructed to EPCA standard, and you mentioned buyers will be able to purchase green add-ons, which will increase the energy. Have you got any idea what green add-ons will be? Like, I don't know, green roofs, rainwater harvesting? You mentioned rainwater earlier on. I mentioned because it's been a bugbear of mine for the last 45 years in construction, and the closest I got to rainwater harvesting was providing water butts for people that looks after their gardens. And you know, it goes on. We could use rainwater for toilets, and you mentioned storage of rainwater on site as well. It's just somebody to have that in the back of their mind. So, you know, so basically what I'm saying is, what are you suggesting as green add-ons?
That's a good question, Councillor, and we'll come out in the detail. I think from our experience, and I stand to be corrected, rainwater harvesting in kind of individual domestic properties doesn't have the same type of benefit as it does where you have large roof areas and where you have also large commercial buildings, for example, an office where you're having 30 toilets flushed continuously all day, for example.
That's right, it's not cost effective, yeah.
And yeah, it's a kind of, that is a system thing, which is where you can efficiency. You think about kind of domestic roof areas as well, and kind of there's the kind of the water butt thing, but with the kind of the swales, I think Dan referred to it. I think I'm sorry I forgot to mention that in the bit I was talking about, but in the site itself, rather than not just that lagoon pond at the bottom, we do have swales or rain gardens, as we I like to simply call them, in the infrastructure in the main kind of streets seen alongside your pavements and footpaths and front gardens and things. So those provide opportunities for some storage as well, and I suppose that is the type of rainwater harvesting, but in a kind of more ecologically biodiverse, natural way, rather than in pipes and systems and grey water management in each individual house, which we do find to be problematical. Yeah. In terms of other energy measures as kind of bolt-ons, I think the use of kind of air source, ground source, heat pumps, those sorts of things, the extent of PVs, for electricity generation and renewing and storage back to the grid and your own property and that sort of thing. Those are the sorts of measures, and maybe enhanced ventilation systems. So how that works in the sales part, Dan, you might want to maybe add a little bit more about the kind of pick and mix. Maybe not dissimilar. There'll be a base standard, of course, which you mentioned there, Councillor, that's in the report. But in the same way that buyers might, at the right stage, be expected to be able to choose their own bathroom fittings and kitchen fittings, there will be opportunities for that level of enhancement in the property to further improve the energy rating, certainly in the sales, in the private sales tenure elements. I don't know, Dan, is there anything to add on to that?
I think we're still having discussions in terms of how far the energy features go on the sales houses. I can see Jane's got a hand up, so I don't know if you want to clarify, Jane, for us.
Yeah, do you want to come in, Jane? I guess you want to answer this.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I was just going to say that, this is a really interesting area of work, actually, Councillor Harding, because it's quickly evolving as well, because things are changing in terms of the appetite for these additional type of benefits that can increase the energy efficiency of the home. And that's really what we're talking about, is options that will be presented to prospective purchasers to increase that energy efficiency of the home, the airtightness of the home, in order to, one, lower bills, and to contribute to our overall objective, which is obviously to mitigate the impact of climate change. I think in terms of exactly what, there's lots of technologies out there. It could be air source. We haven't discussed ground source yet. We haven't discussed photovoltaics. We haven't discussed storage on this site in terms of battery storage, but there are plenty of options out there that we can consider. And I think one of the areas that we're really interested in is around whether there is actually a growing appetite amongst prospective purchasers for that type of product. So actually, should we be building these homes for market sale to EPCA, or actually should we be building them to a comparable standard to our affordable housing? And I think that is a debate that we're going to work through over the next few months before we bring that more detailed paper back to you. Because there are a few examples where this is happening across the UK, and also in Cardiff now, which Nick and I have seen recently, where I think it's perhaps changing the way we think about this. And so I think, you know, what I'd like to say to you is I think this is a really interesting area of work, and we are looking forward to coming back to you really with the detail in terms of whether there will be add-ons for purchasers to buy, or actually whether we will be looking to provide a comparable product across the site for both our affordable housing and our housing for market sale.
I'll do. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Bob, you've been very patient. Do you want to come in, Councillor Owen? Bob, can you hear me?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Jane just sort of answered partly my queries. The site looks really great, fabulous. I'm looking at the report and we're saying that we're looking at least 50% of the homes to be affordable. But Wilmot Dixon have looked at the mix of tenures from 10% affordable to 70. Are we set on where we're going to be at this present time? Is it going to be 50? Is it going to be 70? And like I think it was Craig was on about, you know, the making this particularly on the energy side of things, making it as cheap as possible for the people who can least afford it, which is fantastic. But from a point of view of a private person coming in to buy, they will also have obviously the same efficiencies, but how much will it cost them to buy the house because of all of the technology, you know, the fact that we're using the modern methods of construction and whatever, it's all up you know, top level technology. Is it going to actually make a big additional cost on the houses from a buy-in perspective, if that makes sense?
Yes, yeah. Before you answer, then we've got Nick and Jane who have got their hands up. I'm guessing, Nick, you might want to come in on this, or Jane. Can I pass it to you, Nick?
Yeah, if I could, my one mic works. Thank you. The aspiration is definitely to look to see if we can optimise the level of affordable housing on the site, and I'd love to see at least 50% affordable on the site, as it says in 5.3 of the paper. But clearly there are viability challenges. We've seen inflation go through the roof. I think April's inflation is going to be near 7%, and there are challenges around build. And as Jane just said, if we do go to a product that is equivalent across all of the homes here, then there are cost implications to that in terms of what can actually be delivered in terms of the scheme. But I think we wouldn't be doing this if we were looking at a very low level of affordable housing. This is about optimising the level of affordable housing that we can deliver back for Caerphilly on our land. That is actually the primary driver. When we get into detailed design, when we understand that we're into that phase, we will understand the costs more. And then the second part of your question, Councillor Owen, around what is the sale price of these products? Again, that isn't something we'll know until we're later down there, and whether the market matures, as Jane referenced earlier, about kind of what is the kind of the premium, if you will, for these energy efficient homes. We think, and as Jane referenced, we've seen some very good examples very recently where we do think they're starting to develop a kind of premium market for this, whereas maybe 12, 18, 24 months ago, it would be seen as something that wasn't attractive for buyers. So we really are testing the market here in terms of what these homes are going to cost, and equally then what the affordable housing will actually what value the affordable housing will have. And I don't know whether, Jane, we were doing a double act there and you'll say the same things. Do you want to add something to that?
Do you want to come?
Sorry, you can't see me. My Teams is really playing up for time.
Yes, Chair. Only to add, of course, that from a Welsh Government perspective, Councillor Owen, you'll be aware that the Minister has committed and very vocally made her position clear in terms of what she expects us to deliver, which is 50-50. And of course, we will be drawing down social housing grant for this site. So, you know, 50-50 is probably the minimum that we will seek to achieve, taking into account some of Nick's comments around viability. So yeah, just to reassure you there in terms of what the aspiration is, 50-50 would be a minimum.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Donna, you have asked some questions. Do you want to? Oh, sorry, cut across you there. Well, Donna, have you got one?
Yeah, Chair, sorry about that. Yeah, I do have additional questions. This regards to the report that was said and everything, and also given by Daniel and Craig, and also the actual report that was distributed out. It's my understanding this planning, you're hoping to seek planning permission in March for this particular scheme if everything goes to plan tonight. Is that going to be out? But Daniel said then you're hoping to start the building in August. So is that going to be for full planning permission or outline planning permission in March? And if so, has the consultation gone out to the residents in the area?
Jane, your hands up. Do you want to respond to Councillor Cushing?
Yeah, I need to say, Councillor Cushing, this is for outline.
Jane's got her hand up. I think you can just let her.
You're cutting out a bit, Chair. Shall I continue? Jane,
I'm losing signal.
Okay, you just try to get back with us, and I'll ask Jane to carry on with her contribution there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Adams. Yes, Councillor Cushing, this is for outline planning with all matters reserved. So we will, our intention is to, there's a planning committee on the 23rd of March, and this item is scheduled to be discussed at that meeting. We need to secure outline planning permission to draw down social housing grant in order to fund the acquisition, as is outlined in the report. Our intention then is to work up the scheme in more detail, come back to you during the summer in order to start on site then in autumn.
Okay,
yeah, so when will the consultation begin then with the residents around the area?
There's already been a PAC consultation, and those comments have been taken into account and incorporated into the outline planning application. And then there will be further work done then throughout the summer when we submit the reserve matters.
Okay, thanks very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you very much, Donna.
Can you hear me, guys?
Are you back in now, Chair?
Well, I am here, but I don't know whether you can hear me. I see that Walter Williams, Councillor Williams had his hand up. So
you're keeping your camera off to try to aid connection?
I am, yeah.
Okay, we've got Councillor Kirby is showing his hand.
So Mike, I have Councillor Williams next.
Oh, it's not showing on the screen.
No, Chair, I took my hand down.
There we go.
Right, yeah, I've got.
Thank you, Walter.
Okay, all right. Okay, thanks, Mike. Jez, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Unless anyone else wants to come in, I would like to move the recommendations of paragraphs 3.1 and 3.2 of the report with the recommendation, which I hope the committee will support, that the agreed replacement mugger is in place before the current mugger on site is removed, so that there's no disruption to facility for local residents.
Thanks, Jez. Okay.
I would second that,
do we
Chair.
have somebody to second that?
I second that, okay. Councillor Williams.
Thanks very much, Walter. Okay, so we have a recommendation. Can we have officers just to comment on that, I think, because it's fairly critical that whether that's an achievable objective or not.
Can I just seek clarity, just so I'm clear, Councillor Kirby, and Jane may want to.
I don't mind who wants to come in there. We've got
answer a similar question. It is absolutely our intention to ensure that there is a replacement multi-use games area, absolutely, and that is progressing well. and we'll have more on that later when we present further. But I just wanted to just be clear on what you're saying about the timing. There will definitely be a replacement. I'm not sure we can guarantee that the replacement will be in place at the point at which we will be on site and then starting works, of which will include the removal of the existing mugger. So if the condition is absolutely have agreed a replacement location of mugger, that's one thing. Having the replacement in place before we start works is a slightly different thing. I don't know if Jane wants to comment on that as well, but I just would like some clarity on that if possible.
I think
Jane, do you want to try and respond to that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. I think we will do our utmost to ensure, Councillor Kirby, that does actually happen. I don't think, and I think we will probably be bound by planning policy. I can see Chris had his hand up just now as well in order to come in order to ensure that provision is available. Chris, I don't know whether you want to add to that, but we've been discussing that issue with planning, haven't we, recently?
Yes, thanks, Jane.
Yeah, because I saw your hand. I can't see it now. Please do, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, the planning case officer has made an explicit reference to the requirement to replace it as it is classed as a community facility, and there is a planning policy protecting community facilities. So yeah, we very much need to demonstrate and evidence where the replacement facility is going to be provided. And it may be the case that the planning officer wishes to add a condition to any outline planning permission, requiring it. Well, he will require its provision elsewhere in the locality. But the question for debate really is the trigger as to when it's available to the public, the new mugger, in relation to the removal of the existing mugger. And we have made excellent progress the last week or two in terms of identifying a location for the replacement mugger in the locality. So I'm confident those conversations will progress in the next week or two, and we should have a certainty around where it will be located. And then further to that, we'll have more certainty in terms of the timescales for its provision at the new location.
Okay, can I ask then, Jane? Jane, can I ask that you mentioned that you were going to bring a more detailed report to the committee later in the year. Can you incorporate within that report an update on the progress for the replacement mugger then, please?
Absolutely, Councillor Kirby, no problem at all.
Thank you.
Chairs, given officers' responses and your subsequent statement just now, do you want to withdraw that amendment?
It wasn't an amendment, it was a recommendation, and I'll amend the recommendation that the replacement mugger is in place as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
I think, yeah, I don't know whether as a recommendation can go in now. Can we have just officers' view on that? I'm assuming we've got that seconded.
Yes, yeah.
Very happy to have that as an automation to as soon as possible, Councillor Kirby. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Councillor Walter Williams seconded that. Are you happy with that modification, Walter?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. I don't see any further hands up. Can you, Mike?
No, I'm just having a look down. No others. So are we? Okay. Because I can't see you on camera.
So the
Chair, okay, I'm not sure whether or not you can still hear us.
I've got to keep the camera
continuously. So can I call for the vote on that?
You want to read recommendations, Mike?
Yep. On the recommendation. Yep. Okay. So okay, yeah. So we need to move the recommendation with the comments that we've heard from Councillor Kirby, seconded by Councillor Williams. So have we got a mover for that?
Yeah, I move.
Okay.
It was moved by Councillor Kirby, I believe.
Yeah,
and seconded by Councillor Williams.
It was the recommendation within the move. That's okay. That's clear for everyone. So it's that motion for the recommendation with those comments, which have been accepted by officers as well, that will be actioned. So,
thanks, Mike. I don't know if everybody can hear me now. Just for complete clarity on this, the recommendations are set out in 3.1 and 3.2. So I'll just read those so we know exactly what we're voting on tonight. Members consider the content of the report and support, in principle, the development of the former Oakdale Comprehensive School site by Caerphilly Homes. Support is subject to the receipt and presentation of a detailed cost plan, which will be available in the summer of 2022. With 3.2 being members support the principle of appropriating the site from the general fund to the HRA at a cost to be determined by the district valuer. And furthermore, the additional recommendation that Councillor Kirby has put in with regard to a commitment to the mugger. So that's what we're voting on now. It's been moved and seconded. Mark, can we move to the vote?
Yes, Chair, that should come up on screens now. There we go. It's on the screens now, Chair. That's been carried unanimously, Chair. 9 votes for, no votes against, and no abstentions.
Thanks very much indeed, and thank you, Craig and Dan, for your contribution tonight. It's been really important and valuable. So we're going to skip. Fine, okay, and if you need to go, feel free to do so. Okay, so we're skipping now to agenda item 5, as I discussed at the beginning of the meeting, and this is the blocked again. Excuse me. Bear with me, please. I do apologise for this delay. So we're now moving on to, as I say, agenda item 5, which is the proposed development of the former T. Darren Care Home in Risca. And once again, I'm inviting Councillor Shane Cook to introduce the report. And I think either Jane or Nick will then follow up with further information. So over to you, Shane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to outline the proposed Caerphilly Homes development opportunity at the former T. Darren Care Home site and seek approval in principle to develop the site as an innovative later living scheme for older persons. The building should utilise modern methods of construction and a fabric-first approach to achieve net zero carbon. Also includes space that is flexible enough to accommodate community events and services that could be provided, such as drop-in surgeries. Confirmation from the district valuer approval is sought to appropriate the site from the general fund into the HRA prior to the end of the financial year 2021-2022. So the social housing grant can be drawn down from Welsh Government to part fund the purchase. The report is seeking the views of the Housing and Regional Scrutiny Committee prior to the final in-principle approval from Cabinet. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane. Officers, do you want to comment on it at this stage?
Very briefly, not too much to add, just to, as we have Chris from Penton Architects to provide some more information here. But I used the word flagship for Oakdale. Well, this is, and I think Craig said it means many things to many people earlier, but this is flagship for another reason, because it will be a flagship later living scheme. Those of you that know the area, this has been a long time coming. Again, I'm very excited about this project for a number of reasons, because I can see this sort of provision being replicated elsewhere within Caerphilly in the coming years, and so we're very excited about this as well. We've worked very closely with Pentan in terms of bringing it forward, and it is very similar to Oakdale in terms of the timing and the risk and what we're asking for in terms of moving it to from the general fund into the HRA. So I'd like to hand over to Chris to take us through the scheme.
Thanks, Nick. Yes, Chris. We look forward to seeing your presentation.
Evening, all. Yeah, thanks. I'll share it with you now. So yeah, as Nick used flagship, we've gone exemplary because I think this will be something that is outstanding and above and beyond anything that we currently see in Wales at the moment. I'll run you through a few slides. I'm conscious of time. This is a slightly truncated version of our DAS, which has gone in support of the outline application that's currently under consideration. I'm assuming everybody knows the site, but I'll kind of go through it very briefly. Site of the existing T. Darren Care Home, as outlined there. located just off of St Mary Street, which runs north west southeast. You've got the Darren pub across the road there, the railway line just beyond that. Just to the south, we've got the local surgery and the pharmacy on the corner there, and to the north, the site of an existing health centre, which was for a time going to form part of the redevelopment of the whole site, actually. That this is the site you see here is what's under consideration now, surrounded to the west by predominantly two-storey residential development. Just a bit of background on the site, really. In terms of ecology, nothing unusual nor troubling on that front, and I think that's great in one way, because it means we can make huge net gains in terms of our biodiversity with the scale and ambition of the planting schemes and sud schemes that we're going to be proposing on this site. As with the previous scheme you've been talking about already, sustainability agenda, achieving net zero is a huge driver of the design on this. So understanding aspect orientation is really key for us to make sure we maximise the kind of the natural resources of the site, really. We'll come back onto that a bit later. Just a bit of detail around the kind of the trees, hopping on from ecology. We've got a number that are just off-site to the southeast here, and a number that are within our site boundary here. Some of which will need to be removed for the kind of maximising the ability to develop this site, and the most significant and kind of high quality ones will be retaining up in this corner here. Surrounding the site, there's very little in terms of grain or kind of architectural character to really build upon. I think this presents a fantastic opportunity to do something that it's kind of groundbreaking in all forms on this site, but certainly nothing to kind of define or limit the scheme necessarily. It looks like a pretty simple site. It's fairly level. It's got an existing building to be removed. However, below ground, there are some significant constraints that we're having to deal with. There's an existing culvert that just darts into the site on our boundary with St Mary Street there, and some significant below ground drainage challenges as well that you can see mapped here. What we're proposing to do is to actually divert one leg of that, which is actually quite divisive within the site, and limits the developable area significantly, or would sort of set some accommodation apart from the rest of the scheme, which in the later living scheme, when we're trying to build community, wouldn't be a particularly sensible thing to do. So you can see our proposed diversion around the outskirts of the site there. You can also see the limitation of building in proximity to the health centre to the north west there as well, in terms of overlooking distances. So that would limit the usefulness of that whole section of the site if we didn't divert. Yeah. So our approach, the site kind of form, shape and constraints suggests very, very simply a courtyard form of development. Fantastic for community building, the opportunity to both address the public realm to our boundaries to the north and south east here, to provide something that is semi-public, which offers the opportunity to really engage with the local community, but provides that enclosing form to give a more private community space for the residents at the centre of the scheme. Then starting to look about how we might break the forms down. And you can see we want to open it up in key areas to allow views and routes through. And we're also starting to outline in this drawing kind of key nodes, key spaces. So there's the key focus on the corner, the confluence of these two routes here, where the majority of the communal provision for the residents' use will be, and the entry point into the scheme if you're a pedestrian. At the rear of the courtyard, I suppose the garden courtyard here, we're looking at a building which again has a really flexible use, but is one perhaps designed to draw the wider community in, but is also the kind of the event space for the scheme as well, and we'll touch on that again in a minute. hopping on to sort of massing. So again, there's not many buildings in close proximity to the scheme, and we're by nature of the easements that are setting where we can build to the two sort of road boundaries. We're fairly set back from the footpath, back of footpath there. So the proposition at the moment is for 4-storey development here and 3 to 4-storey development on this leg here. 3-storey development to the sort of northern edge, but something much lower on the southwestern edge here. And again, that's to allow maximum direct sunlight into the courtyard garden at the centre of the scheme. The proportions of the courtyard garden at the centre are such that it's a really large, generous space. So, you know, the massing of the buildings, particularly to the south east here, are not going to be laying that space in shade too heavily. So let's take you on a little sort of journey within the building then. So that key corner here, which we see as a kind of really outward facing key moment within the scheme, which sort of just says what the scheme is about and really kind of gives an insight into the community of the building. We've got residence lounges and a gathering space on ground floor, and that will be a double height space that occupies ground and first floor. And that's the kind of really welcoming space that you've got at the base of the scheme there. Above that, on second and third floor levels, workshop spaces, library, reading room spaces, space for residents to come and use IT facilities to connect with the wider world. Some of the kind of detail of this is still to be formed, because actually we want to know what the residents are going to be wanting in those spaces as well. So we want to be able to respond to the need there. Moving on to the sort of the part of the scheme that is perhaps shared more with the wider community, which I think, when we're thinking about health and well-being, intergenerational interaction, and community building, this is a really key feature for us. And the sort of spaces we're thinking that work really well in other schemes that we've delivered like this are when the local nursery or school come in for a morning, where you get exercise classes, pottery classes, yoga, where you've got those intergenerational activities. But it might also be the space in the scheme where all of our residents can come together and gather for Christmas carols, Christmas dinner, to watch the rugby, the snooker, or to exercise, for instance. So so that's the kind of the secondary sort of gathering space within our scheme there. How will our apartments be accessed? We've got external deck access walkways around the scheme. We are very far away from the typical institutional scenario where you often have double-loaded corridors without the fresh air and natural daylight and sunlight that often access schemes like this. We want to encourage independent living and for people to be active and as mobile for as long as possible. So, you know, we see these as our streets, which are wide enough, generous enough to inhabit, to come out, to chat with your friends, to sit on, to enjoy the sunshine, just outside your own front door. The landscaping is also a really important element for us. There'll be a real mix where we can't plant new trees because of easements. Then we want to create as biodiverse and ecology rich landscape as possible. So perennial borders like you're seeing here might be our approach to the north and the south east for sort of elevations there. Elements of orchard tree planting as well. And I suppose the kind of greatest focus for the community gathering externally is raised kitchen garden beds like those down there, and allotment garden patches as well that you see down there. And we've got a site plan we'll hop onto in a minute. In the central key kind of communal garden at the heart of the scheme for the residents, which is where we're really kind of doing most of our SUDS attenuation, and we're not kind of saying we're going to deal with that in the corner of the site. Actually, that's something that we feel can bring fantastic amenity value as well as biodiversity and ecology value, in tandem with dealing with the necessary runoff from our buildings. And that starts at the really small scale kind of ideas, just at the building edge, into larger kind of ponds and pools within that garden as well. And they might be at different levels to give interest as well. Really early indicative kind of massing study of the scheme, just to kind of indicate that key node on the corner there, where we might pitch it up on the corner to be that the guiding light that draws you back from the community when you've been down shopping in town by day. We've got that community sort of focus here, which is open and permeable and translucent at ground level, so you can see the garden and kitchen garden spaces to one side, and the kind of community garden within the centre of the scheme in the middle here. It just indicates how we might start to nibble away at those kind of story heights as well, to bring articulation, light and shade to the elevations. And there's the site plan, which probably starts to reveal more the sort of series of pools that we might have around, delivering our SUDS approach. The orchard planting with the wildflower meadows underneath, and the raised kitchen garden beds and allotment beds down there. In the corner of the site, which is currently sort of undevelopable because it's cut off by easements, but it's also in the flood zone, is where we're putting most of our parking. And we've got outlined at the moment 2 EV charging spots to go in initially, but I think, as Jane was mentioning with the previous scheme, infrastructure will be there to make sure that all spaces can be turned into those when the time comes. I'll skip over that. I think that the next bit is a bit notey, but I suppose it's to actually to try and deliver to you the ambitions towards net zero on this scheme. We're having lots of design workshops at the moment in terms of how we can deliver that. And we're not just talking about operational carbon, so renewables, PVs on the roof, which is fantastic for reducing residents' fuel bills, of course, and reducing impact on the climate. But actually, we're considering embodied carbon on this, where we're doing the whole life carbon of this building. So all of our material choices, forms of construction, will be considered with that in mind, and we'll be assessing that as we go through each stage of the design as well. So that's really why I think, there isn't, to my knowledge, somebody doing that on a scheme of this nature at this point. So I think, ambition is fantastic on that front. And I think, just to bring it back to sort of the resident experience, a few slides here which really start to reveal our approach and attitude to making this place a fantastic place to live, but one that promotes retaining that independence, promotes community as far as possible. And one of the key aspirations on this project is that we've got the DQR minimum space standard requirements for housing of this form, but we're over and above that, because there are things that we want to deliver on this that increase that ability to remain independent and the quality of life as well. So with that extra space within each of our apartments, we've got the flexibility to have guests, visitors to stay. If the need arises, carers can sleep over. You might have a space in the apartment where you can still work. We're talking later living, but residents here could be still absolutely really active, still engaging in education as well. So places to work, we're thinking about as well, and just making sure that all of those spaces around the home, the threshold spaces where we kind of meet our neighbours, have those chats, they're really designed in from the outset. And we've got, every apartment has its own external kind of private terrace or balcony as well. So everybody has access to fresh air, daylight, sunlight as well, which is so important in retaining kind of health and well-being as well. I won't go on anymore. I'll let you fire some questions if there are any. Back to you guys. Oh, I think you're on mute, Councillor Ridgewell.
John, you're on mute still.
Thank you.
There we go.
You probably realise I had to switch it off because my dog started barking. So forgive me for that. Before I invite questions, I just wanted to say one of the points I wanted to make was how do you visualise this development? adding benefit to the community in which it sits. I think you've answered that in spades. This is quite astonishing. Yeah. So I won't be asking that particular question. And if I can make one request, I was particularly taken with the open fronted courtyard areas or walkways, with what looked like sort of stone pillars. Very Lutyens-esque, I thought. So, I mean, if you can retain that arts and crafts look, I'll be very happy with that. So those are my comments at this stage. But let's open it up for proper discussion. And I see that Councillor Cushing is first on my list. Donna.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Basically, I want to ask a question regarding the building itself. Is this building going to be, I presume there's going to be a manager running the day-to-day side of the communal area, because obviously you've got communal areas. So is this going to be owned by CCBC for CCBC then to run it? And also, are the units going to be, can they purchase the units, or are they going to be rented? Because I assume it's going to be a rental thing then, is it? And how many bedrooms do you anticipate in each unit?
I'm going to divert to Jane on this, if that's okay, for most of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jane, fire away.
Okay. Councillor Cushing, all of the apartments will be owned by Caerphilly Homes, so Caerphilly County Borough Council. All of the apartments will be for social rent. And in fact, in the first instance, they will accommodate households from 3 of our sheltered schemes who are currently waiting for this accommodation. It is noted in the report. We have Castle Court, St Mary's, and also Wayneflower House as well. So residents that are waiting in those schemes will be moved into the new facility once it's built. But they will all be affordable and they will all be owned by us.
And what's the age range of that then? Can I just ask Jane?
It's going to be 60 plus.
Oh, I've got to wait now, Jane.
I'm afraid so.
I'll have to put my name down early.
The aspiration is to build many more of these type of accommodation across the borough in coming years, Councillor Cushing. So,
well, hopefully by the time I get to 60 then, well, I haven't got that much longer to go actually, but by the time I get there, I'll be able to prop myself in for one.
Thanks for that, Donna. Jane, just quickly, it's 60 plus, but I think I noted in the report there may be exceptions for under certain circumstances.
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Ridgewell. There are exceptions to be made as per our common allocations policy. Yeah.
Fine. Okay. Right. Thanks very much indeed. Mike, you're the next on the list. Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very quick comment, really. I know this building from more than 50 years ago because my wife's paternal grandfather actually was there until he was 97, and that was more than 50 years ago. And he loved being there then for the number of years. And he would have actually almost thought he died and gone to heaven if he went into the new one. And he loved the old one. So thank you very much. That's very exciting. Thank you.
Good. Pleasure to hear. Thanks.
Thanks, Mike. Bob, Councillor Owen.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is in my ward. So Donna, you're in the queue behind me. That's number one. We've been waiting for a long time to get this. There's been a lot of, as everybody knows, with the flood defences and whatever, and this has been a long time in the coming, but it really looks to be a fabulous scheme. And I know we're on similar limits, time scale, so we talked with the Oakdale one about getting the valuation in, etc., and whatever, planning, etc., and going through cabinet and everything else. The difference with this scheme, I'm assuming, and perhaps Jane or Nick or someone will come in on this, we've still got the building on site, and I'm assuming that we're looking similarly to the Oakdale scheme to be starting on this sort of ASAP this year. I'm sure that was said at the meeting I had with some of the officers. So with that in mind, if we were talking September, October, sort of spades in the ground, we've still got the old building to get the demolition underway. So I was just wondering how that ties in with the scheme going forward.
Over to you, Jane, I think.
Yeah, Jane, do you want to come in?
Yeah, Councillor Owen, you're absolutely right. We've still got the building there, and it's important that we actually retain that building on site until we've gone through the planning process and had approval for a full planning application. Apologies now, my dog is starting. In terms of timing, our intention now, again, similar to Oakdale, is although we are a little bit more advanced in respect of this project, there's still quite a lot of detail to work through, including the actual construction elements now of the project, and procuring a partner in order for us to take this scheme forward. I noticed Chris has just put in the chat that obviously prior notification for demolition has been granted at the site. Our colleagues in the private sector housing team have been progressing that, but we actually put a hold on it whilst we went through this process. So as soon as we're in a position really to secure the site from a Caerphilly Homes perspective, that will be the first phase then that we go through in terms of actually demolishing the building and preparing the site then in order to take the scheme forward. Realistically, Councillor Owen, though, I can't see that is going to be autumn. We're probably talking maybe winter and possibly even spring. But I can give you our commitment that we will do it as quickly as we possibly can.
Thanks for that, Jane. Yeah, I just replied to Chris to ask him basically how long it'll take to knock it down. That's just a question off screen anyway. Okay. But all right, thank you for that. But I will say on behalf of everybody in Risca, and I think Philippa is on as well, that we're all valuing this as a fabulous scheme for our communities in Risca, east and west.
Yeah,
east and west.
100%. Fantastic. Thank you.
It's really pleasing to hear, members. Thank you very much. You know, this is a fantastic scheme, as Chris has said, a flagship development which will really set the bar for later living accommodation now throughout the county borough. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. I'm quite looking forward to retiring now, actually. Thanks. Councillor
Well, you don't have to retire, Chair. You'll have all the technology available to carry on working, as Chris said in his presentation.
You trying to upset me? Thank you. Walter, you're next on the list.
Okay, thank you, Chair. 2.7, you say evaluation had been sought and is expected to be received mid-February. Are we any close to having an evaluation for the site, or anyone?
I can come in there, Chair. We've actually received the valuation from the district valuer this afternoon. And so we're working through that report now, and all will become known shortly. Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much.
Good timing.
That really is truly excellent news. I mean, I was led to believe it was going to be quite late, and I mean that's making things much easier. Okay, right.
We haven't, Councillor Ridgewell, we haven't had the one on Oakdale yet, but we did have the T Darren one this afternoon. So.
Oh, it's moving in the right direction. It bodes well, doesn't it? I think, you know. Which is very encouraging. Do we have any other questions on this at the moment?
Can't see any, Chair.
Okay. Just one point I wanted to make, and this is probably for the officers. I mean, it's really good to know that those three properties locally are going to be the ones where the residents are going to be moving in, so they're going to be part of that community, which is fantastic. But I wonder if you could just give us a brief flavour of what's going to happen with these other sites, because clearly they've been vacated now, and I'm assuming there'll be opportunities for further development there.
Absolutely. If I just come in quickly, and Joan may want to add on that. We are looking at options of all of them. The priority is to look at all of our assets to optimise the level of affordable housing going forward. And they are in all three of those sites are under consideration at the moment. It's about the scale, the tenure, whether it is residential on all of them or if it's residential on some of them. But we need to go through the options appraisal process on all of those before making any decisions. But they are definitely on our radar as Caerphilly Homes as potential development sites going forward for the future.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks very much indeed. Were there any
Chair,
other questions, Mike?
Councillor
I couldn't
Philip
see
Leonard
anybody.
has also indicated.
Thanks, Chair. Okay, yeah, you're on my screen, Philip. Please go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, with the raised beds, the gardens, will they be there for the residents to maintain and to garden, or would that be, you know, more of a maintenance issue? Just because it would be great for the residents to have the opportunity to do some gardening and things like that. Thanks.
Absolutely, residents, yeah, there to
Brilliant.
enjoy,
Brilliant.
and actually that goes for we do so many schemes where if we invest a little in the landscaping at the outset, we find that our residents absolutely take ownership of it and
Yes.
and kind of tend it, and some of these places turn absolutely fantastic.
Oh, that's lovely.
So yeah,
because they love their gardening, don't they? And you know, brilliant. Thank you.
Yep.
And they could be supported by their visitors.
Yes.
And a good move for us to develop. So we have our planters in Risco with rhubarb in them. They do it in Usk, and I got some very nice rhubarb given to me early in the summer, which was really good. You know, I was walking past, there was a volunteer lady doing the work there, and I commented on it. She said, "Would you like some sticks?" I said, "Thank you very much." So yeah, we're all going in the right direction. You know me and my gardening.
Crumble.
Indeed. Okay, well, thanks very much indeed. I don't seem to have any more questions on this particular issue. I just wanted to make a quick point here because in the report I think I noticed about Caerphilly Homes delivering, you know, and I was going to ask really, but you know, why has the creation of a dedicated development team been so critical? Well, I don't think I really need to ask that question because quite clearly the presentations we've had tonight show how effectively that you as a team and we have been working with our partners, and I think you know, it's something we all ought to applaud, and I'm looking forward immensely to how things pan out in the future. So thanks very much indeed on that particular matter, and thank you, Chris. If you want to stay, you're welcome, but if you need to depart, then feel free.
I'll leave you to it. Thanks very much.
Great stuff. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Oh, so we need to move to the vote now. Forgive me, I've got to get back on my screens. So the proposal regarding the development of the former Titaran home in Risca, and the recommendations were set out on page 22 of our packs. So to remind you that members consider the content of the report and support the development by Caerphilly Homes of the former Titaran site in principle, subject to the receipt and presentation of a satisfactory cost plan, which will be available early summer 2022. 3.2, members support a decision to appropriate the site from the general fund to the HRA in principle at a cost to be determined by the district valuer, which we now have. The revised valuation is expected to be received early February, and we've actually got it. And finally, members support the proposal to move to the next stage of the project in order to determine the most suitable procurement route for the detailed design and construction phase of this project. So can I have somebody to recommend that, please? A mover.
I move, Jez Kirby.
I'll
Thank you, Jez.
Philippa Leonard.
Thank you, Philippa. Okay. So I have a mover in a second. If we could move to the vote now, Mark, please.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The poll should come up on screens now. Yeah, that's been carried unanimously, Chair. We've got 8 votes for, no votes against, and no abstentions.
Thanks very much indeed, Mark. Okay, so that's carried, yeah. So we're now going back to agenda item 4, which is the Welsh Government lease scheme proposal. And if I can ask Councillor Shane Cook to introduce the report again, and I think Kerry Denman will be adding some additional information later. So over to you, Shane.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform members of the current request from Welsh Government for local authorities to express an interest in the leasing scheme Wales in meeting their duties under Part 2 of the Housing Wales Act 2014. The report is seeking the views of Scrutiny Committee of whether CCBC should express an interest in the leasing scheme Wales, or to decline the expression of interest and remain with its current provider sector scheme, Caerphilly Quays. Should CCBC wish to adopt the LSW scheme, then it would need to expand the current private sector model, Caerphilly Quays. This model currently supports the Housing Solutions team in meeting its statutory obligations and discharging homelessness duties in the private rental sector. A report will be taken to Cabinet for decision on 23rd of February 2022, which will outline the views of Scrutiny Committee. Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed. Yeah. Kerry, do you want to speak to this report?
If I could just say a few words, and then Kerry's on hand to answer any questions.
Yeah, Nick, fine, yeah.
Chair,
Okay.
apologies, my issues with connection, but
We're all suffering tonight.
just for extra context, we launched Caerphilly Quays back in 2018, as it says, as our leasing scheme to discharge our duty. And then Welsh Gov did launch their leasing scheme pilot in 2019, which the Cabinet did decide not to participate in back in 2019, just for context. I know it's in the paper. And then obviously the main scheme was then launched in 2021. The paper does say we have compared the schemes as detailed in there, and our kind of our view and recommendation is to not go with the Welsh Government leasing scheme, and to continue with the excellent work that Caerphilly Quays has done. There's a lot of mutual trust, great relationships have been built between the landlords that have entertained this scheme. It's been great work from the team who've set up Caerphilly Quays, and we feel that actually the incentives that the Welsh Government leasing schemes have on offer are not incentive enough, and we feel that we would lose a number of the landlords that are already engaging with in Caerphilly Quays, if indeed we did go with the Welsh Government leasing scheme. And I think that's very important to note, and we are seeing more landlords join Caerphilly Quays month on month. So it's great work from the team. I just wanted to point that out, and we'll take any questions, and Kerry and Byron and Sadia are also with us if there's any questions that they want to take.
Thanks, Nick. Kerry, do you want to add something to that?
No, it was just to add again, just drawing members' attention to the reasons for the recommendation, particularly 4.2, in highlighting the very key fundamental factors of why we feel that this is the right decision. And again, drawing members' attention to the report. And as Nick has indicated, there are some financial incentives that the Welsh Government lease scheme are putting forward in terms of being able to cover some additional salary costs, and some incentives for landlords for works to be done to property, and some grant works in relation to the empty homes. However, having done a survey with the current Caerphilly Quays landlords, the majority of those landlords have advised ourselves as Caerphilly County Borough Council that they do not find the Welsh Government lease scheme offer attractive. The financial incentives on offer are not something that they would want to take forward, and hence if we were to adopt that model, therefore we would lose that property portfolio. Ultimately, as we move forward this year, in line with Welsh Government guidance, develop a rapid housing transitional plan, it was key and fundamental that we bring this report to committee at this current stage and to Cabinet for decision, because if the decision is to express the interest with the Welsh Government lease scheme as part of my rapid housing plan to take forward this year, I would be starting from a zero property portfolio and landlord portfolio as far as taking forward the private sector element of that plan going forward.
Thank you, Kerry. Before I open up, I think in a way it's reassuring, because the response from the people within this team affirms really the success of Caerphilly Quays, does it not? I think we all ought to be congratulating you and the team and everybody for the success of that. I mean, it's been a wonderful thing, and it's great. It's going to continue. Subject, of course, the decision is going to be taken in a few minutes. So if I can just open up the debate now, and Mike, Councillor Adams, you're the first on the list.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks to Shane and Nick and yourself, Kerry. I've had some experience of how well Caerphilly Quays operate, and I just wondered, a quick question: has there been any kind of pressure off Welsh Government that they would like this to go national, to be able to promote it in a different way, or are they very happy that each local authority will make their own decision?
At this current stage, it is purely expression of interest. There are a number of authorities who are not expressing an interest to date, based on information we've received at a further webinar last week. I have sent a holding email pending, obviously, kind of attending scrutiny today and cabinet decision today. At this time, we're not able to clarify our decision. We're taking it through the governance process, but I have indicated that our recommendation is that we will be declining subject to further decision, in light of the success that the Caerphilly's team have driven over the last 3.5 years to get the Caerphilly Keys scheme to where it is currently.
Thank you very much for that.
Thanks, Mike.
Councillor Walter Williams,
Walter,
Chair.
Councillor Williams. Yep. Thanks, Mike. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Kerry, there's the question I have on 5.61, bottom of page 16. You say you would lose a current portfolio built by Caerphilly Keys, and the tenants could possibly serve notice at a later date. Well, what would happen to them tenants then? Would Caerphilly have to look for properties for them to go into, or how would that work?
Yes.
Will they just be made homeless, you know?
Well, ultimately, our concern, having had some consultation with landlords, is that the properties that they've provided Caerphilly Keys is on a working relationship with that particular sector and with the support that the Caerphilly Keys provide both landlord and tenant throughout the ongoing life of that tenancy. So therefore, if we were to disband Caerphilly Keys, there is a significant risk that subsequently, future down the line, that notices could be served. And ultimately, as a local authority, if those households were not able to secure accommodation themselves, then we would have a statutory duty to assist those households into further accommodation.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks, Walter. You're happy with that? Yeah. I don't see any further hands up. Mike,
No,
you see anybody on your
looking
screen?
down, Chair. Can't see any further indications. It's an excellent report, isn't it? And explains so much anyway.
Indeed, Mike, and I think I made the point that it is clearly another success story, you know, from Housing Department, and I think we will have to give that consideration when we move to the vote, which we'll talk about now. So the recommendations are on page 12 of your packs, okay? Members are requested to consider the report and agree on which of the two pathways the housing solution team should adopt, take forward its private rented sector scheme. So we have option 1, which is to express an interest in the leasing scheme for Wales, the LSW, and take this forward as the council's private sector pathway and disband Caerphilly Keys. Option 2 is to decline to express an interest in LSW on the grounds that CCBC has a successful PRS scheme in place with Caerphilly Keys. Those are the two options that we have. Do we have anybody who would like to move option 1 or option 2 for us?
I would like to move option 2, please, John.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, so
second that, Chair.
Oh.
I think there's 2 or 3 voices there, weren't there?
Yeah.
Donna, I believe, as well. So we have option 2 as the proposal. We have a mover and a seconder. Can we move to the vote then, Mark, on this one?
Yes, Chair. The forms poll should appear on screens now. Thank you. Yeah, that's been carried unanimously, Chair. We've got 8 votes for, no votes against and no abstentions. Thank
you very much indeed, Mark. Okay, thank you, members. Then this really brings the meeting to a conclusion. Can I thank everybody present here for your input tonight, and particularly the speakers. I don't suppose they're with us any longer, but they really have made a huge difference, I think, to everybody here in being able to give that detail and flesh out exactly what has been going on. So without more ado, I wish you all good night, and our paths will cross again, I'm sure, sometime in the future. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.